everybody, and welcome back to Fortress Camelot. It's already episode number 7, and well, after last week, which has been totally focused on the Studio Pack DLC, we are now back in Fortress Camelot, and in today's episode we will be using glass from the DLC. Not much more, to be honest, but that will be changing in the next couple of episodes. This episode, though, will be very interesting because we are going back to talk about a little bit more about the medieval time in general. In this episode, we are building, and I'm going to spoil already, the basic shape of a little chapel in this area. And I think talking about religion within the medieval time is very interesting. But before we do so, I'm going through a few comments. Please forgive me that I'm going to read out just a few because I need some time to explain a little bit about the history behind all of this. But yeah, let's just start with the first comment, which is from Neyu, and he said, "Make a guillotine, please. Also, your real name is not Rudi." No, my real name is not Rudi, and yes, I'm going to do a guillotine. So that's a fact. Then again, we have Mr. DL Fendel. I'm going to read out the shorter one of your two comments because it's always cool to have all your comments. I'm reading through all of them, but to read them out, it would fill in like half of the episode. So basically, let's start with your first comment, or your shorter one, to be honest. Where is that one? Wait a second. There we go. A funny thought about the plague victim that people can't comment. Now that we have the DLC and the zombies in it will, smile in brackets. No, never mind, rolling off the floor laughing. Meanwhile, the church question. A castle would have within a chapel. Guess what we are doing in this episode? Either for the royals only or where all the town people came to worship, so not having a separate building might not be as big as an issue. Also, there were separate from the town, castles, fortresses, separate monasteries and abbeys which had a certain amount of immunity from attack because they were considered holy ground and were not all built for fortifications, and certainly people from fortresses, castle towns could go there and get their faith served. Good. That's a good segue into what we are going to talk about later. I'm going to read out first some more comments. But yeah. We have another comment from Lisha, which is, you did a little bit of interior work where the coaster goes through the building. I think it's a good idea to clean up the inside of the buildings so the ride experience isn't broken. I enjoyed the story about your name. First of all, thank you, and cool to hear that you enjoyed the story. And second, yes, we will definitely have interior work at the buildings, but I like to do it at the end because then I know how everything is set up and I can just do a little bit of work on this. We have to, we have to look into it because the coaster is quite fast, and so there hasn't to be too much detail going into it because that doesn't have to be too much detail in it. That's the good thing, so we can do it at the end and save at least some polies over there. But yeah. Then we have another comment from Michael, which is just curious. Will you be adding nets where the coaster goes overpass? A lot of coasters do it, and it's just an addition to realism. P.S. Keep up the good work. Great work. Yeah, cool. Yes, I'm going to do these nets kind of things. I don't know how exactly I'm going to do these, but I definitely gonna do this. Then we have from Harry Powell. Yay, I love when you put cinematics after the time-lapse. I will try to do so more often. In this episode, I'm not quite sure if I can do so because we won't be finished with the chapel, though I am finished in real life with the chapel, and I haven't filmed in between, so it's a little bit problematic, to be honest. Potentially I'm going to find a screenshot and I put it at the end, but I'm not quite sure about this. So yeah, because I'm recording the commentary now a little bit ahead of the cutting, so yeah. So, but that's it. I can't read through more of them, but please, guys, keep on commenting, and I'm going to have some separate episodes which are longer, and we are going more into these kind of commentaries or comments. Commentary is the wrong word, but it's a lot of fun reading through all of them, and I try also to comment as much and answer as much as possible in the comments already. But yeah, a few of them will always make their way into an episode, so please make sure to stay cool and keep on commenting. But before we go now into the story of the church, you can see in the background I am preparing already the windows, and obviously I had already in mind getting the glass, so these kind of windows are already made that kind of way that we will use the glass in the end. I can already spoil that, yeah, it didn't work out the way I was hoping to, because the glass pieces are too big actually to make really nice patterns that look like really medieval glass windows in churches or chapels. But yeah, it will kind of look decent. I found a way to mimic it, and yeah, I am quite happy with the result, though it isn't the perfect result. But yeah, never mind. It is what it is. We will be dealing with it, so it is kind of a good thing we achieved there. But anyways, now, as I said, I will every once in a while talk about some more in detail things about the medieval time, and this time I haven't been watching it on Shadiversity's channel. I have watched it on a German channel because I found it really interesting. I'll put down the link below, but I don't know if people are interested too much because it's a German one. Anyways, I wanted to talk a tiny little bit about the role of religion and the church in general in the medieval time. So we have to start quite early in the late 11th century, where most of the Central European part was still reigned by an emperor. And the thing is, even though it was officially ruled by an emperor, we had a lot of smaller rulers in between who had all their own little piece of land, and it was kind of hard to get a structure into this. And you know, most of Europe suffered over the whole time of the medieval era about the problem that they couldn't really organize themselves because it was all so spread out. The communication wasn't too good because, you know, obviously you had to jump on your horse or jump into a little cart and go somewhere to bring messages. You know, there wasn't anything like emails or stuff like that back then, so it was all a lot just shorter and more difficult to actually deliver messages. And that's also how it was also more difficult to rule about the whole Central Europe, and that's why you needed a structure. And yeah, how this came into action is that they found out it was quite handy that the church itself had a pretty nice organization. The Christs in the Central Europe area, they had obviously a quite good structure. There was the Pope, and basically everything else was structured by the religion itself. So it was quite handy that, you know, you had a structure available which you could use. So back then the emperor tried to use the church as much as possible, and was trying to somehow seamlessly integrate the normal ruling of their areas, and also to use the structure of the church. So they were kind of combining the normal human picture of the world and also the religious picture of the world with all the belief and stuff. But it appeared in the later stages, or like years later, the church took over more and more with their power. So popes got more powerful than ever before, and they took away the power from the emperors more and more and more. And you know, what then happened was that they kind of used the power they had as a church. And by power I mean, back then, you know, as I said, there was not that much communication going on in general. People haven't been educated too well, and they believed strongly in what the church told them. And you know, before dying, actually, people were afraid of what happened after the death, and they were believing that they will go either way into heaven or hell, and there was something in between, obviously, which is the purgatory. And you know, people were afraid of this, and the church used this kind of scary sort of people, and they were dealing with those, you know, with the fear of people. What they did in the medieval time then is they used their power in the way that they introduced and I have to look up the word because I completely forgot it. It's the discharge commerce. So what does the discharge commerce do? If people were afraid and thought they have sinned, and you know, they haven't been too good of a person, they were fearing to go into hell, and the church offered them a trade. So they had to give money to the church and do a certain action in exchange, for example, to not eat for a certain amount of time, or whatever, to work in a religious institution or something. And this is how you got rid of your sins, which obviously doesn't work, but they dealt with it because they needed money for their really big cathedrals they were building all the way around across Europe, right? Obviously also in Rome and stuff. So how did this then go on? Well, you know, there was like the whole area of Europe was divided into very, very small areas ruled by simple rulers, and obviously every once in a while there was an emperor in between. But the emperor was like the big institution. But as I described already at the beginning, it's not as today if you have a chancellor or something who's ruling the whole country. That wasn't simply possible. It was like, yeah, there was an emperor who was above everybody, but it appeared that the rulers of the smaller areas and the kings and queens and the castles and stuff, they had a lot more power about their little areas where they lived in. And then there was obviously the church, which had power all across Europe, because the one thing that combined everyone was the fear and, you know, being afraid of death. And this is what they made them, or put them into position that the church itself had to be everywhere. And now, you know, we have to transfer this now into the comment which also D.L. Fendel put down, which was a good segue at the beginning. Obviously, if there wasn't a medieval town which was built around a cathedral or a church, you still needed to bring in a religious building within every area, because people needed religious buildings to go for the discharge commerce. And this is also why you will always find within a castle there is either way a little chapel, or as D.L. Fendel perfectly explained, in the location or in the close area around the castle, you will definitely find a religious institution. Either way, if it is for example, as he said, an abbey or a little chapel or something like that, it is always a little bit easier to have this kind of things around, so people can go there for the discharge commerce. And in the end, the church kind of were the secret rulers of the medieval time. Or not even the secret rulers. I mean, they didn't fight, but everything else was more or less ruled by the church, because they were basically, yeah, it was the institution for education. If you wanted to be educated, you had to go to the monastery, right? The monastery was basically the location where you could learn. Later on, universities were more and more important, but first of all, universities were also ruled by, you guessed it, the church. So all in all, everything what was important in the medieval time was more or less in the later stages. Not even in the early stages, but in the later stages, it was definitely ruled by the church. And this is why the church played a very big role in the medieval time. But, you know, as I am now going back to Fortress Camelot, this is basically a fortress which is built around a little castle fortress thingy, which means that the religious influence here was a little bit less than it would be around a big cathedral, obviously. And so there is this little chapel, and you know, that was like now 10 minutes of a story around this little chapel, why it is just a little chapel, but why we'll still have this little chapel in here. And yeah, what also happened then was in the early 16th century, or maybe in the late 15th century, it doesn't matter how you want it, there was that one guy called Martin Luther. And he was changing this all a tiny little bit, and yeah, from this day on, the church was separate into two, and this changed also the face of the later medieval era, but that's a topic for on its own. But I hope that if you have some interest in it, you now go and try to find out yourself a little bit more, because it will now go very into detail. And I want to stop here, obviously, because I want to talk a tiny little bit about my windows I put into position. You have seen that in the background, obviously, how it does look. So what I used is the little chain fence we now have, or the chain link fence we now have in the new update. And if you sink them in perfectly into the glass, and I had to make a layer of two glasses next to each other, two glass behind each other, so it does really make a nice addition to it, because you have these little squares within the glass, which actually looks like in churches. And then I put the iron fence from the spooky pack just in front of it, as if this would be the little railing in front of it, to make this kind of work. And I guess it does work kind of nicely though. So I really hope that this will help definitely to make it look the way I wanted it to look, because otherwise yeah, it is a little bit, I would say, not too easy or too simple, but it's looking more or less, yeah, yeah, simple and just one color wise. I mean, it's hard to explain it. I wanted to have it completely colorful and nice, but it appeared that it didn't work out too well. But anyways, guys, that's it about my commentary. I hope you could follow it, or could follow this explanation about the role of the church in the medieval time. It was for me, yeah, quite hard to explain that in English today, because even in German I had to go a little bit more into it and look for some words and stuff, for some expressions. So it's not too much about the language itself, it's more or less about the topic, because it's not that easy to explain and to make it while looking at the video in the background and try to still follow it, and yeah. But there we go, that's it. Have a nice day, guys, and as always, make sure to put down some comments down below. If you like that video, leave a like, and in any case, have a good day. Obviously, my voice. Sorry, my bad. Bye bye, guys. See you.